and welcome to another Giant Slayer TFT Top 5 Countdown video. Today we'll be taking a look into the current top 5 compositions for patch 11.24. After a long 3 weeks, we're finally getting our hands on a new patch and a new meta. So far, it seems the pace of the game has shifted back towards the late game with more emphasis on level 8 compositions and 4-cost champions. That said, there's going to be plenty of time for the meta to evolve given 11.24 is sticking around for about 4 weeks. On top of that, there is potentially a B patch coming out that may shift the game slightly. Given that, take our top 5 today with a small grain of salt because there very well may be a completely different top 5 by the end of 11.24. With that covered, let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Kicking off our top 5, we have Challenger coming in as the number 5 composition. Despite a few balance adjustments, Challenger is still going strong at 11.24. But there is a twist. Instead of just Yone being the lone carry, Fiora is now capable of dishing out the damage, albeit slightly less consistently than Yone. In addition to that, the changes they made to the trait augments has made 8 Challenger a bit easier to play since it can actually be worthwhile to pick up one of the emblems, hearts, or soul augments. Even though there have been a few changes, overall the composition is essentially the same. Slap in 6 Challenger champions plus whatever additional units you want to add. Orianna and another Enchanter makes sense for Clockwork, Braum and Leona add additional frontline and a bit of CC that Challenger lacks, then there's just going full on 8 Challenger. There's plenty of options, but at the end of the day, Challenger is about the simplicity since you're either playing Yone carry or Fiora carry with a bunch of other Challenger champions. In terms of items, Yone's are essentially the same, with Runin's, Guardian Angel, and Last Whisper being the most common. Infinity Edge can also be subbed in for Last Whisper since it does pack a bit more damage. Fiora items lean more into sustain and a bit of damage, with Infinity Edge being strong, but also Bloodthirster, Hand of Justice, and Guardian Angel. Fiora cares more about lasting long in the fight to get multiple casts off of her ability, while Yone is about slashing his way through enemy units. Outside of those two champions, the items you have can really go anywhere. Kaisa, Orianna, or Samira are all fantastic item holders, or you can go the frontline route and toss some defensive items onto Braum or Leona. All that really matters is focusing on grabbing your main carry items. All in all, Challenger compositions are easy to run and great to pivot into because of how simple they are and do a decent job of being a consistent top 4 comp. That said, they can be feast or famine, so don't always expect to place in the top 4 if you low roll at level 7 and 8. Let's move on to the next composition that comes in at number 4, Syndicate. Syndicate is a bit more complex to talk about because it is multiple compositions in one, except it has an overarching theme across all of those builds. That theme is Akali. Without Akali, Syndicate doesn't feel like it scales all that well in the late game. Akali is amazing in the current meta, both due to the buffs at level 1, as well as the targeting bug that previously plagued the game. Now Akali can safely dash around the enemy backline and not worry about being randomly targeted by the enemy carry. Back to the different compositions of Syndicate. Primarily, the way you want to play Syndicate is to have strong opener, generally Darius and Twisted Fate, and then transition into level 8 to find Akali. Simple in theory, but not that easy to do in practice because the mid-game can be difficult for Syndicates. Augments also play a big role in this because Payday can ensure a strong early economy, but does require a bit of high rolling to outright win fights for the additional gold. Another way to play Syndicate is by re-rolling the low-cost champions or re-rolling for Shaco 3. It's more common currently to aim for Shaco 3 because, in general, he's more consistent. Twisted Fate and Darius can be strong in the mid-game when 3-starred, but getting stuck rolling on level 5 can delay finding Akali later on, hurting the overall scaling of the comp. Shaco, on the other hand, spikes once you upgrade him to level 2 and once again at level 3. That buys you plenty of time to aim for Akali as your late-game insurance. It's also better in general to roll at level 7 for Syndicate since you will want Braum plus the small chance of finding an early Akali. So in general, our recommendation is if you wish to play a reroll Syndicate comp, to do so on level 7 with Shaco 3 as the goal. But as we said, the more common way is simply playing Syndicates like a normal comp. The flow of the game should be utilizing Twisted Fate and Darius early game into Shaco 2 and Braum with 5 Syndicates for the mid game and ending with Akali 2 as the primary carry in the late game. As for items, Infinity Edge is amazing on both Shaco and Akali. Other items to look for are Last Whisper, Bloodthirster, and Guardian Angel on Shaco, with Akali items being Hand of Justice, Blue Buff, Gunblade, and Ionic Spark. Akali is more flexible in terms of items than Shaco is. In the landscape of the meta, Syndicates are definitely about average because there is a lot of reliance on finding Akali. If you find Akali, it's a top 4. If not, it's gonna be a struggle. Up next, we have CHEMTECH BRUISER coming in at number 3. With the meta shifting back towards 4 and 5 cost champions, that means CHEMTECH BRUISER goes up a lot in value. The target bug also helps a lot for both Urgot and Jinx, since both champions want to gun down one unit to the next, as splitting their damage across multiple units tends to be inefficient. And of course, CHEMTECH did receive a minor rework, as it now provides the bonuses for 8 seconds across all tiers, so you're not forced to add in more and more CHEMTECHs to make the trait useful. For the composition itself, the core champions are generally Mundo, Urgot, Zac, Jinx, Vi, Tahm Kench, and from there you can really add in anything. 5 CHEMTECH means adding in Lissandra and Victor, or you can add more utility with Enchanters and Socialite. Yuumi is also a common addition to this board for Scholar and the extra utility she adds, especially since this board tends to lack in CC. Another important change to mention is that the trait augment changes benefit CHEMTECH greatly because it accelerates their early game. With an early CHEMTECH augment, you get a free Zac, opening the door for early 3 CHEMTECH and Bruiser. This eliminates the often weak early game for the synergy and makes transitioning into level 7 and 8 a lot easier to find the important high-cost champions of Urgot, Mundo, and Jinx. The main downside for this composition is that Bruisers do struggle against KOG'MAW, and KOG'MAW right now is quite popular. It's also worth noting that while CHEMTECH is going to be a more consistent synergy, it did lose a bit of power at tier 5 and 7. Still, thanks to several changes in the patch, plus the bug fix, CHEMTECH Bruiser is one of the stronger and most consistent builds in the current meta. Another composition utilizing Bruisers is up next, with Mutant Colossus coming in at number 2. The dawn of Cho'Gath is upon us, and he shall feast. Cryptic, but true, as Cho'Gath carry is finally a viable composition in the meta. There are quite a few reasons for this. 1, they buff the heck out of Cho'Gath and the other 2 Colossus units. 2, augment changes are quite beneficial for this composition, particularly increased frequency of underdogs and Ascension showing up. 3, the pace of the game slowing down means Cho'Gath has more time to stack, especially if you 3-star him. For the composition itself, if it wasn't already obvious, the core carry is going to be Cho'Gath. But the beauty of Mutant is that there can be multiple carries depending on the mutation. Synaptic Web, for example, means Malzahar carry becomes viable if you have a blue buff. Some of the auto-attack focused mutations make both KOG'MAW and Kai'Sa better, while defensive mutations are better in general for Cho'Gath. The simplest way to play this comp is to focus on Cho'Gath, but having flexibility helps the comp a lot. The rest of the composition is generally going to be Mundo, Malzahar, Kassadin, and either KOG'MAW or Kai'Sa depending on the mutation. Generally, the better second Colossus is going to be Sion, since it will be easier to 2-star him, but Sion and Galio are interchangeable. The deciding factor is whether you're able to find Galio 2 and where the Socialite hex ends up being. It's worth noting that yes, Colossus does mean fewer champions on the board. 2 units taking up 4 slots is not ideal, but due to the buffs to those champions and the way the meta is currently playing out, it's not too big of an issue. A 25% damage reduction on your carry that can gain stacking health is quite good, but keep in mind, like with the previous composition, Cho'Gath does struggle against KOG'MAW. As for items, anything defensive is great on Cho'Gath, such as Bramble Vest. Redemption is actually quite good at reducing AoE damage and provides a small bit of healing. Gunblade can be useful, though it's more of a Malzahar item, and the Omnivamp mutation makes it less necessary. Other avenues to healing are usually from augments such as Underdogs and Celestial. The ultimate goal of this composition is either 3-star Cho'Gath or scale in the late game to find Kai'Sa 2. There are some differences depending on the mutation, such as 3-starring Malzahar with Synaptic Web, or aiming to 3-star KOG'MAW when he's the carry, but in general the game plan is centered around Cho'Gath and scaling. This composition is by far one of the strongest, though it does struggle into the last composition in our top 5. And that composition, coming in at number 1, is Protector KOG'MAW. Yep, despite a slower paced meta and Katarina being booted out, the best composition is still a reroll build. And much like Katarina, Protector KOG'MAW isn't always going to win games. It's not going to scale well against a lot of the 5-cost compositions in the late game. What it does well, though, is hitting consistent power spikes in stage 3 and 4 to easily coast into a top 4. That means it's the best composition for climbing ranked because it's quite easy to hit those power spikes. As for the composition itself, the core units are KOG'MAW, Kassadin, Garen, Graves, and Caitlyn. This makes for an appealing composition using the traits Protector, Academy, Sniper, and Twin Shot. Mutant is the most common trait to add afterwards, generally with Mundo, and paired with Vi, but in reality, you can take this composition wherever you want at level 5. The goal? Reroll for KOG'MAW 3, Garen 3, and Kassadin 3. The other 2 1-costs can be 3-starred, but aren't anywhere near as important as the core 3. KOG'MAW 3 with Rageblade will destroy any frontline, particularly high health units like Bruisers. Thanks to Protector, Kassadin and Garen refuse to die, especially with items. Overall, if your plan is to climb ranked and you don't want to worry about playing flexibly or knowing the ins and outs of the meta, we highly recommend playing Protector KOG'MAW. That does it for our top 5 compositions for patch 11.24. But before we go, we have a few honorable mentions to talk about. Our first honorable mention is Jin Carry and is in a similar position as Challenger. Challenger can often be a 1st or 8th build due to its reliance on hitting Yone 2 and Fiora 2. Jin Carry is similar because it uses a lot of 4-cost units, and hitting all of them determines how effective it will be. To play Jin Carry, you need Jin, Braum, Orianna, and Janna. That's 4 high-cost units, not to mention that you can add even more high-cost units like Seraphine for Socialite or Yuumi. If you hit all the necessary units, Jin is fantastic. If not, well, it's an unfortunate bottom 4. And our second and last honorable mention is Innovator. Innovator took a hit with the nerfs it received in the patch, but is still doing well as one of the better capped late game boards. But due to the nerfs, it is much harder to hit that late game with Innovators and find all the necessary units and upgrades. In addition to that, Innovators don't scale nearly as well anymore, so there's a large reliance on lucking out and finding an augment for 7 Innovator. Much like Jin Carry, if you can get all the necessary champions and get a bit lucky with augments, Innovators can still win games. That's all for today, folks. The meta is definitely in an interesting spot, but as we mentioned in the intro, a likely Plan B patch will throw things off for a bit. But don't worry, there's 4 weeks to get in tune with the meta for some over the holidays ranked climbing. Let us know in the comment section below which composition you've been having the most success with. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.